They locked every door, they closed every bridge. They told millions of people, stay inside. Do not go near the city center. All of that for one bank robbery. This wasn't a quiet stick-up in the corner of some small-town branch. This was a heist so bold, so chaotic, that police shut down an entire city to stop it. Today, we're breaking down how one robbery turned a normal weekday morning into a full-scale urban lockdown. This is the story of how 6 men with one plan and a lot of bullets brought a whole city to a standstill. It started like any other weekday morning. Offices were opening. Traffic lights flipped from red to green. Coffee shops handed out drinks to commuters who weren't really awake yet. In the financial district, the name of bank for now we'll say Central First Bank was one of those places people walked past without thinking. Glass facade, security cameras, revolving doors, just another bank in a city full of them. Inside, about 30 people were starting their day. Tellers counting cash, managers checking emails, security guards watching screens. No one knew that in less than 10 minutes, every single person in that building would be a hostage. The robbery crew had been planning this job for months. 6 men, each with a role. Each with a reason to be desperate enough to try. There was the inside man, a former armored truck driver who knew delivery schedules and security changeover times. There was the tech guy, a small-time hacker who could disable alarms for a few minutes, but not all of them, not for long. There were 3 armed men used to risk, willing to shoot first if anyone got brave. And then there was the leader. He wasn't loud, he wasn't dramatic. But he understood one thing very clearly. If you want big money, you have to take big risks. The plan was simple on paper. Hit the bank minutes after an armored truck delivery. Get into the vault area. Grab as much cash as possible. Be gone in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. That was the window they gave themselves before the city woke up. They were wrong. The robbers didn't kick the doors in. They didn't ram a truck into the lobby. They walked in like customers. 2 of them entered first. Clean clothes, caps pulled low, no weapons visible. One headed to the line like he needed to deposit a check. The other wandered toward the side corridor, right where the armored truck guards usually came through. At 8:57 a.m., the armored security van pulled up in the alley behind the bank. 2 guards stepped out, weapons holstered, carrying heavy cash containers toward the back door. The leader and his man watched through the interior glass. They didn't look like nervous amateurs. They looked like people who had done this before. At exactly 8:59 a.m., the back door buzzed. The guard stepped in. And that was the signal. Inside the lobby, one of the customers reached under his jacket. The heist had begun. The first sound anyone remembers is not shouting. It's the sound of metal, a shotgun racking, a handgun cocking. Heavy boots slamming down on the polished floor. Everybody down. This is a robbery. Don't be a hero. The voices weren't shaking, they were measured and cold. One robber fired a single blast into the ceiling to make the message very clear. This was not a joke. Panic took over instantly. People dropped. Some screamed, others froze. The security guard in the lobby reached for his weapon, and that's when the second shot rang out. The guard went down. Not dead, but hit badly enough that he couldn't fight. Within 30 seconds, the lobby belonged to the thieves. 2 men jumped the counter and forced the tellers away from the cash drawers. Another moved to the doors, locking them and dragging a heavy bench in front as a makeshift barricade. In the back, the leader pushed the armored truck guards to the ground, gun to their heads. He grabbed their keys and access codes. He knew exactly which doors those codes opened. The cameras caught almost everything. But there was one thing the robbers didn't know. The bank's alarm system had already sent a silent signal to the police. At 9:02 a.m., the nearest patrol car got the call. Silent alarm triggered at Central First Bank. Possible robbery in progress. At first, the dispatchers thought it might be a false alarm. Banks sometimes triggered them by mistake. But protocol is protocol. 2 officers rolled toward the address, lights off, sirens off, just in case. Inside the bank, the leader moved quickly. He forced a manager to open the inner security door. Beyond that was the vault corridor. Heavy concrete, steel gates, reinforced doors. Time didn't move slowly here. Every second was a countdown. He knew the armored delivery had just been made. That meant fresh cash had been moved inside, potentially millions in high-denomination bills. But getting to it wasn't just about keys. It was about codes, timing, and nerves. Behind him, one of his men shouted from the lobby, Police! Outside! The 6-minute plan was already broken. At 9:05 a.m., the first patrol car pulled up across from the bank. 2 officers stepped out, trying to see through the reflection on the glass. They saw people lying on the floor. They saw armed men moving. They saw blood. The officers took cover behind their doors and radioed in. Confirm. Active armed robbery in progress. Shots fired. Hostages inside. We need backup now. Within seconds, the radio network exploded. Supervisors, SWAT, traffic control, helicopters. The city was waking up to something very dangerous and very public. Inside the bank, the robbers heard the sirens in the distance. The leader looked at the clock. They were only 4 minutes in. He had a choice. Try to run now, with less money, maybe straight into police. Or fortify the bank and buy time. He chose time. And that's when a robbery turned into a siege. One robber dragged a teller to the window and screamed at the police outside, "Back off or we start shooting people." Some hostages were pushed into a tight group in the middle of the lobby. Others were forced to lie face down near the counters, hands over their heads. The leader finished what he could in the vault corridor, grabbing stacks of cash from the most accessible compartments, then came back to the lobby, weighing every second. They had money. They had guns. But outside the enemy was multiplying. By 9:15 a.m., the first SWAT vehicles arrived. Armed officers in helmets and vests fanned out behind cars and walls, rifles trained on the entrance. Police command took over the scene. This was no longer just a patrol call. This was now a city-level emergency. The first decision from police command was quick and brutal. Lock it down. Streets around the bank were closed. Nearby subway stations were evacuated. Traffic lights were frozen to keep vehicles away from the perimeter. Businesses within a few blocks were told to shut their doors and keep customers inside. Office towers were instructed not to let anyone go downstairs. It wasn't just one street. It wasn't just one block. Within 30 minutes, a huge part of the city center became a no-go zone. News helicopters circled above, capturing live footage of flashing lights, police tape, and a black knot of armored vehicles around a glass-fronted bank. An entire city now knew something big and very bad was happening. At 9:30 a.m., the first call went into the bank. The police negotiator introduced himself slowly, calmly. His job wasn't to be a hero. His job was to stop more people from dying. He started with simple questions. How many of you are in there? How many hostages? Is anyone badly hurt? The leader lied. He always claimed fewer guns, fewer men, fewer injuries. He made demands. He wanted a getaway car. He wanted safe passage. He wanted time. On the other side of the line, the negotiator scribbled notes, but the strategy was clear. They were not letting 6 armed robbers drive away with hostages through a packed city. The bank was surrounded. Roads were blocked. Snipers were taking positions. The city was effectively shut down. The goal was to make time work for the police, not the thieves. While negotiators talked, fear simmered inside. Hostages whispered prayers. Tellers held hands under the counters. One injured security guard fought to stay conscious. Not all robbers handled the pressure the same way. One was jumpy, pacing, waving his weapon too close to people's heads. Another stayed in a corner, watching, saying almost nothing. The leader moved between them, keeping them focused. But even he could feel control slipping. Every new siren outside, every news chopper overhead, every minute that passed meant more attention, more police, less chance of escape. When one hostage sobbed too loudly, the jumpy robber hit him with the butt of his rifle. Blood ran down the man's face. The leader snapped at his own crew. Do not kill anyone unless we have no choice. You kill a hostage, we're dead too. He knew the rule. The moment blood spills, negotiations get colder. By mid-morning, the impact on the city was total. Entire blocks were silent except for police radios. People looked out from offices and apartments, watching a war zone that used to be their commute. Buses were rerouted. Ambulances were diverted. Delivery trucks were stuck in place, their drivers listening to news on the radio. All because 6 men had walked into a bank with guns. Social media and TV live feeds turned the robbery into a real-time spectacle. People watched from living rooms miles away, but downtown felt like a ghost town under siege. The phrase spread fast. They shut down the whole city for one bank robbery. Around noon, the situation inside the bank started to change. One hostage had a panic attack. Another fainted. The injured guard needed medical help. The air felt heavy, hot, and stale. The negotiator used that. He offered to send in a medic. He offered water and food. He offered a chance to release some hostages as a goodwill gesture. The leader refused at first. Every hostage released meant less leverage, but the injured guard was getting worse. Even his own men knew that if someone died, it would be harder to walk out alive. Finally, the leader agreed to release 2 wounded hostages in exchange for the police pulling some vehicles back a few meters. The standoff shifted from raw violence to a chess match. The leader had never really planned for this scenario. He had planned for cameras. He had planned for alarms. He had planned for police. But he had not planned for an entire city to be locked down around him like a steel trap. His men started arguing about what to do next. One wanted to fight it out. One wanted to surrender. One just wanted to run. Outside, SWAT teams quietly gathered more intel. They analyzed camera angles, hostage statements from those released, and blueprints of the bank. They were building a picture. Room by room, door by door. And somewhere in that picture, they were hoping to find a way in. By late afternoon, the turning point came. The negotiator had been talking to the leader for hours. He'd learned just enough about his voice, his ego, and his fears to push in the right places. He kept repeating one simple message. You're not getting out of this city with a car full of hostages. That's not on the table. The only choice you have is how this ends for you, alive or dead. At the same time, SWAT officers were quietly setting small charges on a side entrance, not to blow it open fully, but to have an option. The robber crew was tired, hungry, stressed. Their 6-minute job had turned into a 6-hour siege. One of the youngest robbers finally broke. He shouted that he didn't want to die in a bank lobby. That was all the negotiator needed. He focused on that man, talked directly to him over the phone, offered a deal for anyone who came out with their hands up. Inside, the crew was no longer one solid unit. It was a group of scared individuals with guns, and that made them vulnerable. As darkness began to fall, the decision came. The first robber walked out, hands above his head, weapon left behind, then another, then a third. Each one was grabbed, cuffed, and pulled behind a wall for questioning. The leader knew he was losing control and leverage. With 3 of his own men gone, fewer hostages, and the city still locked tight, he tried one last bluff. He demanded a helicopter. It didn't work. The negotiator didn't blink. Look outside, he told him. You see how many guns are pointed at that door. There is no helicopter. There is no drive away. There is surrender, or there is death. Minutes later, the last 3 robbers came out. No gunfire, no final shootout. The siege was over. The city could breathe again. When it was all over, investigators walked through the silent bank. Bullet holes in the ceiling. Blood on the floor. Cash strewn on desks where it had been counted in a panic. Hostages were escorted out, some crying, some numb. They gave statements one by one. They'd survived, but they'd never walk into a bank the same way again. The city gradually reopened. Roads unclogged. Shops turned their signs from closed back to open. But the question remained, why shut the whole city down for one bank robbery? The answer is simple and terrifying. Because when criminals walk into a bank with guns, they're not just threatening money. They're threatening lives. And in a dense, crowded city, one unchecked escape attempt could turn into a rolling disaster. Car chases, crossfire, hostages taken on the street. Shutting down the city wasn't an overreaction. It was the only way to make sure the chaos stayed in one place. This robbery failed. The crew didn't get away with millions. They didn't vanish into the night. They didn't become legends. Instead, they became a case study, a lesson in how fast a simple crime can escalate and how far a city will go to stop it. From the moment that first gun was drawn, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. Control of one building. Control of a street. Control of an entire city. They shut everything down to keep one robbery from turning into something far worse. If you want more true crime breakdowns like this, real tactics, real mistakes, real consequences, make sure you hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments. Would you have shut down the whole city for one bank robbery? Because after this story, you might see the answer differently.